That November morning, it was not yet 7 when a knock struck the iron gates of Wrenmore Manor. Hard. Decisive. Once. The young footman who opened the door was not expecting visitors at such an hour. Still heavy with sleep, he pulled the door ajar, glanced outside, and stepped back. The man before him looked like a ghost. Pale, exhausted, wrapped in a torn military coat. An old scar marked his shoulder. His hair had grown long, his beard neglected. But his eyes were sharp, alive, and carried the unmistakable recognition of someone who knew this place intimately. "Sir, the servant's voice failed him. "I know how I look." The man stepped inside. His voice was tired, but there was something unyielding beneath it, a hardness that would not break. "Have them prepare." When James Ashford, Duke of Wrenmore, returned from the dead, no one was there to receive him. He stopped when he entered the great hall. Only for a second. But in that second, his eyes swept across the room, from end to end, with an old habit, the kind war had carved into him. The instinct to search for danger, for change, for what did not belong. It had kept him alive for 3 years. It was working now. His father's portrait was gone. A pale rectangle remained on the wall, the mark of where it had hung for decades. That lighter patch, left by dust and time, looked like the residue of a crime. The portrait had been carefully removed, but the trace had been forgotten. Or ignored. Both said the same thing. James pulled his gaze away from the mark and moved on. His mother's piano was gone. His father's hunting collection, the old maps on the walls, the oak bookcase in the corner, gone. In their place stood new things. More expensive. More ostentatious. They reflected someone's taste, but not the taste of this house. The furniture had been replaced. The curtains changed. Even the carpets were different. It was as though someone had emptied the house from within, erased its past, and written themselves over it. Carefully. Patiently. With the intention of staying. James did not remove his coat. He simply stood there and looked. Years ago, he had run through this hall as a boy. He had played chess with his father at the table in the corner. That table was gone too. His mother's voice still seemed to linger somewhere in the walls. But everything had been covered. Everything had been made to disappear. 3 years. Could a house change this much in 3 years? It could. But only if someone wanted it to. Footsteps sounded from the top of the staircase. Slow at first, then faltering. James lifted his head. Richard Ashford was descending. Fully dressed at 7 in the morning, hair combed, collar immaculate. As though he had been expecting him. Or as though he was always prepared at this hour, with the habits of a man who owned the house. He stopped when his eyes met James. Everything was there in that pause. Shock, yes, but beneath it, something else. Something faster. Calculation. Assessment. And a flicker of fear, so brief it was almost invisible. Then he smiled. Broad. Warm. The kind of smile reserved for greeting a cousin. James. He came down the stairs more quickly, arms opening. My God. James, his voice broke, or seemed to. We thought you were dead. All of us. When the official notice came. I know. Richard embraced him. Firmly. For a long moment. James did not return it. His hands remained at his sides. His eyes, over Richard's shoulder, continued scanning the room. A brief silence. Richard pulled back. He was still smiling, but his eyes moved over James, taking in the torn coat, the exhausted face, the single bag in his hand. Recording everything. Like a merchant. Where have you been all this time? Why didn't you send word, couldn't you find a way? I was a prisoner. Yes, but afterward. I was a prisoner for 3 years, Richard. Richard fell silent. James turned back to the hall and began to walk slowly. His fingers brushed the edge of a new sofa, touched it, released it. He went to the window and looked out. The garden had changed as well. His mother's rose garden had been uprooted, replaced with neatly trimmed shrubs. Symmetrical. Cold. Beautiful, but lifeless. The house looks well, he said. His voice was flat. Richard's shoulders tightened, barely perceptible, but James noticed. I did what I could, Richard replied. Things couldn't simply stop while you were gone. The estate, the lands, the tenants, everything needed an owner. So I. Thank you. The sentence cut through the air. Richard did not know how to respond. He had not expected gratitude, he had expected protest, questions, perhaps anger. Gratitude caught him unprepared. Of course, he said at last. Of course, James. This house is yours. It always was. I only. Where did you put my father's portrait? Silence. Richard's smile came a moment too late. We sent it for restoration. The frame was damaged. When? Last year. It's been in restoration for a year. These things take time, James, a proper. A sound came from the kitchen. The clink of a glass. Then the soft noise of something falling. Then footsteps, quick, but trying not to be noticed, the kind that tries to erase its own existence. James stopped speaking. He listened. Then something strange happened. Difficult to name. Something shifted inside him, not in his shoulders, but deeper. As though he recognized something. Not the sound exactly. But the rhythm of the movement, that particular urgency in those footsteps, somewhere deep within, something said stop. His eyes turned toward the kitchen door. Who is that? He asked. Richard answered a moment too late. Only a moment. But James noticed. The kitchen staff, Richard said. His voice was smooth, relaxed, prepared. We hired new people while you were gone. Why do you ask? James did not answer. He straightened his coat and walked toward the kitchen. James. Richard's voice came from behind him. Sharper now, more urgent. Breakfast is being prepared. You're tired, you should go to your room. James did not stop. He placed his hand on the kitchen door. Warm air rushed out, smelling of bread, wood fire, that familiar scent of a house at the first hour of morning. His eyes adjusted to the haze. Then he saw the stove. Then the woman standing at it. Her back was turned. Her hair was pinned up. She wore a servant's apron. Her hands moved, quick, practiced, absorbed in their work. She had not heard him enter. Or did not wish to. James took a step. The wooden floor creaked. She froze. Her hands stopped midair. Her shoulders tensed. Then, very slowly, as though searching for a way to delay the moment, she turned. And James Ashford, Duke of Renmore, looked into the face of the woman he had left behind when he went to war 3 years ago. Eleanor. Shock filled her eyes first. Pure, unguarded, impossible to conceal. Then, swiftly, like a door closing, that shock retreated. Something else replaced it. Something James did not recognize. It was not cold, not distant. It was more complex than shame, harder than fragility. James stepped forward again. Eleanor stepped back. Only one step. But she did. "Sir," she said. Her voice was steady. Controlled. It had learned much in 3 years. James stopped. That single word, "sir," hit his chest like a blow. This woman knew his name. She had spoken it hundreds of times. In different tones, at different moments, but always his name. And now she said, "Sir." Flat. Formal. Distant. As though they were strangers. As though nothing had ever happened. James's jaw tightened. Something caught in his throat, but he swallowed it. His eyes did not leave her face, trying to read that thing in her gaze. What was she trying to say? What was she hiding? Why was she here? Why the apron? Why the kitchen? Why had she said, "Sir"? "Eleanor." "Breakfast is nearly ready, sir," Eleanor said. Her voice did not tremble. "Shall it be brought to your room?" James did not answer. He simply looked at her. And Eleanor looked back, just for a moment, just for a fraction of a second. Before she closed the door. In that instant, James saw everything he had been searching for. Everything. But he did not yet know how to read it. Behind him, Richard's voice returned. "James, come, I'll explain everything, you're exhausted." James did not leave the kitchen. He did not turn. He stood there, watching as Eleanor turned back to the stove, returned her hands to their work, continued as though nothing had happened. But her hands were trembling. Only slightly. Barely enough to notice. James noticed. That day, James went to his room. He did not have to. But he did, because staying was harder. He had stood at the kitchen door, watching Eleanor's trembling hands, and for the first time, he had not known what to do. The feeling was unfamiliar. For 3 years, he had risen each morning knowing his next step. Even in the prison camp. Even on the darkest days. There had always been a next step. Now there was none. His room had not changed, at least not as much as the others. The bed was the same. The writing desk was the same. But small things were missing. The books on his shelf had been rearranged, wrongly. The old compass his mother had given him was gone. The small wooden box by the window, the one where he had kept Eleanor's letters, was gone. James stared at the empty space for a long time. Then he sat on the bed and, for the first time, truly for the first time, felt what exhaustion was. Not in his bones, but deeper. The weight of 3 years. Of everything he had carried. He did not sleep. He simply waited. Without knowing what he was waiting for. Dinner had been set at the large table. Richard had 2 guests beside him, a local landowner and his wife. James recognized them, their faces lingered somewhere in a corner of his memory. But their names did not come immediately. 3 years ago, they had been important people. Now they were simply 2 individuals sitting at the table. "We are so fortunate you have returned, Duke," the man said. "Terrible news, truly terrible. And yet, here you are, safe and sound." "Thank you," James said. "What was the war like?" "I mean, of course it was difficult, but—" "It was difficult." A brief silence followed. The woman glanced at her husband. Richard tapped the table lightly, steering the conversation elsewhere. Talk continued, of lands, of harvests, of the coming winter. James listened, but did not hear. His gaze moved across the table, his hands resting against the edge of his plate. Then the door opened for service. James did not lift his head. But he knew. He knew before she entered. He recognized the rhythm of those footsteps. Eleanor walked in. A large tray in her hands, an apron at her waist, her face composed and controlled. She moved around the table, serving the guests, then Richard. When she came to James, she did not hesitate, not quite. It was the smallest pause, almost non-existent, but it was there. James felt it. "Sir," Eleanor said quietly, placing the plate before him. James raised his head. Her eyes were lowered, like a servant's. But for a fleeting moment, no longer than a blink, she looked up. And her gaze met his. Then she moved on. She circled the table, returned to the kitchen, and the door closed. Richard was saying something. One of the guests laughed. James looked at his plate. He did not eat. It was past midnight. The house had fallen silent. The guests had left, Richard had withdrawn to his room. James sat in his own, the candle extinguished, waiting in the dark. He had tried to sleep, it had not worked. Since the prison camp, sleep had not come easily. His eyes would close, but his mind would not still, it would fix itself somewhere and refuse to move. Tonight, it was fixed on Eleanor. He rose. Took his coat. Left the room. The corridor was dark, lit only by scattered candlelight. He descended the stairs, crossed the great hall. His feet carried him to the kitchen, unconsciously, or perhaps consciously, though he refused to admit it. He stopped at the door. Light seeped through from within. Low, flickering candlelight. And sounds, the soft clink of glasses, the creak of a chair. Someone else could not sleep. James opened the door. Eleanor was seated at the table. A glass of water before her, a worn piece of fabric in her hands, she was sewing, or trying to. When James entered, she froze. Her hands stilled in midair. Her eyes turned toward the door. They looked at each other. Neither spoke. A second passed, then another. Eleanor was about to rise, to say, "Sir, I apologize, I will leave at once." James knew it, could hear the words before they were spoken. "Sit," he said. Eleanor stopped. "Sit, Eleanor." At the sound of her name, something shifted in her face. Small, controlled, but there. Slowly, she sat back down. James pulled the chair opposite her and took his seat. Between them stood a wooden table, and 3 years, and hundreds of unspoken things. The candle burned between them. "How long have you been here?" James asked. Eleanor paused for a moment. 8 months. 8 months, James repeated. His voice was flat. Too flat. "For 8 months, you have been working in this house as a servant." "Yes, sir." "Do not call me that." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "What should I call you?" "My name." Silence. Eleanor lowered her gaze to the table. James watched her. He knew this woman's face by heart, every line, every expression. But now there was something he did not recognize. A new layer. Hardened, sealed, locked away. "Why did you come?" James said. "Here. To this house." "Why?" "I had nowhere else to go." She said it plainly. There was no apology in her voice, no appeal for pity. Only the truth, bare and unadorned. That honesty caught James off guard. "Your family." "Ruined," Eleanor said. "After my father died, the debt surfaced. Everything was lost. The house, the land, everything." She paused. "You were dead as well." The last sentence came out differently. Lower, from a different place. James leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Look at me. Eleanor did not raise her head. Eleanor. Look at me. Slowly, she did. Their eyes met. And James found what he had been searching for, but what he found was not what he had expected. There was no anger. No accusation. Only exhaustion. Deep, bone-settled exhaustion, the kind that had given up fighting. It shook him more than anger ever could. How did Richard treat you? He asked. Eleanor looked away. Eleanor. I work here, sir, she said. Her voice had closed again, composed once more. I do my duties. Beyond that. How did he treat you? The silence stretched. The candle flickered in the faint draft from the window. Eleanor's hands lay on the table, her fingers gripping the piece of cloth. When he had the chance, she said at last, very softly, almost inaudible, he made improper offers. She stopped. I refused. James's hands clenched into fists beneath the table, unseen. But Eleanor noticed. James, she said. For the first time. She spoke his name without realizing it. Then she did realize, and her eyes widened. Go on, James said. His voice was controlled, but something was burning beneath it. When I refused, he made me a servant, Eleanor said. He said, being the hero's fiancée brought you nowhere. Now you will see what you truly are. And she stopped. For a long moment. I had no other choice. James stood abruptly. His chair scraped back. Eleanor flinched. James moved to the window and looked outside. The garden lay in darkness, the moon hidden behind clouds. His hands were clasped behind his back, fingers interlocked. For a long time, he said nothing. They thought I was dead, he said at last. Still looking outward. An official notice came, they said. My name was not on the prisoner lists. He turned, looking at her. Did you believe it too? Eleanor swallowed. The notice came. Official seal. Your name was on it. And you believed it. I waited for months, she said. Her voice broke, just once, the first time that night. She gathered herself quickly. 4 months. And then, she lowered her head. Yes. I believed it. James returned to the table. He did not sit, he stood there. Eleanor's head was bowed, her eyes on the table. James extended his hand, placed it near hers, not touching, but close. Look at me, he said. She did. I am here, James said. And I am not leaving. Something broke in Eleanor's eyes. Small, fast, but it broke. Then it closed again. Not entirely this time. Richard, James said. I will speak to him tomorrow. James. Eleanor's voice was a warning. Be careful. He has been here a long time. He knows everything, everyone. You have only just returned. You are tired. You have nothing. I have something. Eleanor waited. Time, James said. And my intention. It was early morning. James had not slept, but when he rose, his body was accustomed to it. 3 years of little sleep and less rest had made waking a reflex. He washed his face, dressed in his old clothes. He did not look at the mirror. He went downstairs. The house had not yet woken. Sounds came from the kitchen, not Eleanor, someone else, moving faster, louder. James did not stop there. He went straight outside. The air was cold. That sharp November cold that turned breath white. James paused at the doorway, drew it deep into his lungs. He had longed for this scent for 3 years, wet earth, wood, morning grass. The prison camp had smelled different. Everything had been different there. He closed his eyes. For a second. Then opened them and walked toward the stables. The stables lay behind the manor, among oak trees. James had come here often as a boy, his father had taught him to ride here. The first time he fell, he had not cried. His father had said, "Ashfords rise when they fall." And he had risen. He opened the door. The scent of horses, hay, oiled leather. Warmth. Someone was already at work, a man in the far corner, bent over the straw, his movements slow but steady. He was old now, his hair completely white, but his shoulders still carried strength. James recognized him. Thomas. The man turned. His eyes met James's. And in them there was none of Richard's calculation, none of the guest's polite astonishment. Only something else. Something warm, worn, long waiting. "My lord," Thomas said, his voice rough. He straightened slowly and bowed. "Thank God." James stepped closer. "You're well." "I am, my lord." Thomas wiped his hands on his trousers. His eyes moved over James, the torn coat, the tired face, but he said nothing of it. "I had nearly lost hope of seeing you again." "Why?" Thomas hesitated. Looked away, then back. Something weighed inside him, whether to speak or remain silent. James recognized it. People looked like that when they were deciding not what they knew, but whether they would say it. "Shall we sit, my lord?" Thomas said. There was an old bench in the back of the stable. James had sat there many times, once with his father, then alone, then not at all. Thomas remained standing opposite him, hands clasped. "Where shall I begin?" Thomas said. It was not a question. "At the beginning," James replied. Thomas began. He spoke slowly, carefully. But as James listened, he understood. Thomas knew everything. He had known for months, perhaps years, and had carried it alone. "When the news of your death arrived," Thomas said, "Mr. Richard acted immediately. Unbelievably quickly. As though he had been waiting. Within 2 days, lawyers came. Legal papers were prepared, seals ready. Everything was in order. Too in order. Too fast. Were they my father's lawyers? No, my lord. Others. He brought them from London." James said nothing. He listened. The management of the estate passed to him. The lands, the accounts, everything. At first, he did little. As though waiting. Then he began to change things. Slowly. First small things. Then larger ones. Thomas paused. "I did not remove your father's portrait, my lord. The order was given." "I know," James said. Thomas continued. He spoke of the tenants, of several families driven off their lands, of people who had lived here for decades suddenly forced to leave. Of how most of the old servants had been replaced. Of how everything in the house had been reshaped, step by step. James listened with patience. Then Thomas stopped. He took a deep breath. "Will you not ask about Miss Eleanor, my lord?" James's eyes turned to him. "Tell me." Thomas looked down. His hands were still clasped before him. "Miss Eleanor arrived 8 months ago," he said. "She came through the gates at night. Alone. With only a small bag. I opened the door. I looked at her face, and I let her in. Where was Richard? In London that night. He returned the next day. Thomas's jaw tightened. I gave Miss Eleanor a guest room. I thought about what I could do. But in the morning, Mr. Richard returned, and... He stopped. And? James said. He was not courteous, my lord. Thomas chose his words carefully. He already seemed to know her situation. That her family had collapsed, that she had nowhere else to go. As if he had been expecting her. He sat at the table, drank his tea, and said to her, he hesitated. You may remain at Renmore. But everyone here works. James's hands curled into fists upon his knees. And what did Miss Eleanor say? Nothing. She only looked at him. For a long time. Then she rose and said, very well. Thomas lifted his head, meeting James's gaze. She did not cry, my lord. Not once have I seen her cry. But that morning, when she said, very well, there was something in her voice. Something broken. James stood. He remained there, looking at the wooden wall of the stable. Outside, the faint sounds of horses, the wind brushing against the boards. For a long while, he said nothing. How did Richard treat her? He said at last. It was not a question. Thomas lowered his gaze. At first, it was small things. Giving her the hardest tasks. Waking her before anyone else. Humiliating her before guests. But then. He made offers, my lord. Thomas lowered his voice. Miss Eleanor refused him. Every time. Without hesitation. And each time, Mr. Richard became more, he paused, searching for the word. Persistent. James turned. Looked at him. Who else knows of this? Some of the kitchen women. But they do not speak, my lord. They fear losing their positions. Why did you tell me? Thomas raised his head. His eyes were steady, his voice the same. Because you have returned, my lord. And for 8 months, I have not recognized this house. But I recognize you. I knew your father. I know what this family is meant to be. He paused. Someone had to speak. James studied him for a moment. Then he stepped forward and placed a hand on his shoulder. Brief, but sincere. Thank you, Thomas. Thomas bowed his head. His eyes had filled, but he did not let them fall. James was about to leave the stable when Thomas called after him. My lord. James turned. Thomas hesitated, then walked to the back wall of the stable. He reached behind an old wooden shelf and pulled something out, a small, folded sheet of paper, yellowed with damp. I kept this, he said. I do not know if it was right to keep it. But I could not bring myself to throw it away. James took it. Opened it. An old letter. His father's handwriting, he would recognize it anywhere. Short, only a few lines. But within those lines, there was something. A name, a date, an instruction. James read it once. Then again. Then a third time. He folded it and slipped it into his pocket. Anything else? He asked. Thomas shook his head. For now, no, my lord. James left the stable. The cold air struck his face. He paused, looking up at the sky, heavy clouds, perhaps snow to come. He reached into his pocket. Felt the letter. He took a step. Then another. And entered the manor. Richard was having breakfast at the large table. Alone. A generous plate before him, a newspaper at his side, pale winter sunlight filtering through the window. He sat comfortably, leaned back, one leg crossed over the other. The posture of a man who belonged. Who had grown accustomed to it. When James entered, Richard did not lower his paper. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep? Was everything in your room satisfactory?" James sat across from him. He poured coffee, did not drink it, simply held the cup before him. "We need to talk," he said. This time, Richard folded the newspaper and set it aside. He turned to James. Something flickered in his eyes, readiness. He had expected this. "Of course," he said. "What would you like to discuss?" "Everything," James said. "The estates. The documents. And Eleanor." Richard's expression did not change. "Who is Eleanor?" James looked at him. Richard waited a few seconds, then gave a light laugh. A jest. "The woman from the kitchen. Vasa's daughter." He took a sip of his coffee. "What would you like to see, James?" "The accounts? The condition of the lands? Everything is recorded, you may review it at any time." "The documents," James said. "The ones declaring me dead. And everything built upon them." Richard tapped the table lightly with a finger, thoughtfully. Then he stood. "Come," he said. They went to the study. It had been his father's study, or it had been. Now everything was altered. The desk remained, the large oak desk, but everything upon it was different. New papers. New seals. A new order. The shelves had been rearranged. His father's legal books were still there, but new volumes had been inserted among them. Richard opened a cabinet. Took out a file. Placed it on the desk. "Here," he said. "Read. It's all there." James sat. Opened the file. Turned the pages, slowly, carefully. His face did not change as he read. The documents were proper. Too proper. Official seals, correct signatures, precise dates. The army's notice of death, followed swiftly by the transfer of inheritance papers. Everything was legal. Everything followed procedure. But it was too fast. Not even 2 weeks had passed after the notice before the inheritance was completed. Normally, such processes took months. James closed the file. "You moved quickly," he said. Richard shrugged. "The estate needed an owner. You were gone. I was here. What was I to do, wait? The lands must be worked, the tenants managed, the accounts maintained. These things require authority, James. In 2 weeks? I have capable lawyers." James rose. Left the file on the desk. Began to walk slowly around the room, thoughtful. He stopped by the window and looked outside. "I want my estate back," he said. "Of course," Richard replied. "It is yours. It always has been. I only—" "When?" Richard paused. "These matters take time, James. There are documents, formal transfers, legal procedures." "How much time?" Richard stepped forward, to the front of the desk. He sat. Folded his hands together. And something changed in his face, subtle, almost imperceptible, but it changed. The mask slipped. Beneath it stood another man. Calculating. Cold. A man who had thought about this for a long time. "Sit, James," he said. "Let us speak properly." James did not turn. He remained at the window. "We can speak here." Richard waited a moment. Then began. "You have just returned from war. You are tired, worn. What do you have with you? A bag. A torn coat. No money, no connections. You have been absent from this world for 3 years. His voice was soft, almost gentle. If you go to court, it will take years. You will need lawyers, witnesses, funds. You do not even have a lawyer. I do. Now James turned. Looked at him. And your offer? He asked. Richard smiled. He had been waiting for that. I remain here, he said. The estate remains under my management. And you, he spread his hands. You live comfortably. You will not lack money. You may travel, go to London, go wherever you wish. Only. Do not attempt to reclaim this house. Silence. The wind stirred outside. The wooden frame creaked. James walked to the table. Leaned over, opened the file again. Turned a few pages, he was looking for something. He found it. Tapped it with his finger. This signature, he said. The witness signature. On the death notice. Richard looked. Yes. Who was this man? A witness. A military officer. The name is incorrect, James said. There was no officer by that name in my unit. I knew them all. Richard's expression did not shift by even a fraction. Perhaps from another unit. Perhaps, James said. He closed the file, set it down. Looked at Richard. Or perhaps not. A brief silence. Richard stood. Walked around the desk, came close to James. There was little distance between them now. His voice lowered. James. Be sensible. You have nothing. You cannot take this house, you cannot remove me, you cannot win in court. If you stand against me, what will you have left in the end? James looked at him. For a long time. I have an offer, he said. Richard raised an eyebrow. Is there space in the stable? Richard froze. What? In the stable, James said. His voice was calm, almost casual. I need somewhere to stay. I will work there, assist Thomas. In return, a place to sleep and food. For several seconds, Richard said nothing. Then he laughed, a genuine laugh, born of astonishment. The Duke of Ashford, sleeping in the stable? Why not? James, this is absurd. Will you accept or not? Richard stopped. His eyes studied James. This was something, a game, part of a plan. But what plan? The man had nothing. He was exhausted, penniless, alone. And if he stayed in the stable, he would not be inside the manor. He would be away from Eleanor. Perhaps that was for the best. Richard shrugged. As you wish, he said. But this is your choice, James. Do not forget that. I will not, James said. He turned and left the study. As he walked down the corridor, he paused by the door. The kitchen door stood slightly open. Voices drifted from within. James turned his head. Eleanor stood near the doorway. Her face was pale. Her hands clasped before her. She had heard, how much, James could not know, but it was written in her gaze. Her eyes were filled. But she did not let them fall. James looked at her. He did not speak a single word. But his eyes said something, calm, resolute, unbroken. Eleanor's lips trembled. She spoke in a voice so low it was almost inaudible. Don't do this, she said. Don't sleep in the stable. It would be better if you left. Leave this place, James, save yourself. I am not leaving, James said. But I am not leaving, Eleanor. Silence. Eleanor closed her eyes. Took a breath. Opened them again. James moved past her, heading toward the door. Just before reaching it, he turned, glancing over his shoulder. I will be in the stable tonight, he said. If you wish to speak, you know where to find me. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in. And James Ashford, the Duke who had lost everything, walked toward the stable. His back was straight. His steps were firm. As though he were not walking to a stable, but to war. The stable was different at night. By day, it was loud, horses shifting, Thomas at work, sounds from outside. But at night, it fell silent. Only the animals' breathing remained, the rustle of hay, the wind against the wooden walls. James did not sleep that first night. He sat with his back against the wall, knees drawn up, waiting in the dark. It reminded him of the prison camp. Those nights had been just as silent, just as cold. But it was different. There, every morning he had thought, can I get out today? Here, every morning would be, one more step. The difference was immense. He took the letter from his pocket. He could not read it in the dark, but he held it, felt the thick paper, the grooves left by his father's ink beneath his fingers. There was a name in the letter. A date. And a single sentence, if one day things go wrong, go to this man. His father had written it. When? Why? James did not know. But he kept it. Thomas arrived early the next morning. He did not stop when he saw James. He did not seem surprised. As though he had expected this, he simply continued his work. James stood, brushing straw from his clothes. What would you have me do? He asked. Thomas looked at him for a long moment. Then inclined his head and began to show him the tasks. That day, James worked with the horses. He cleaned, watered, fed them. His hands ached. He had groomed horses before, but 3 years had passed, and the prison camp had taught his hands different skills. By afternoon, he was repairing wood. The back wall of the stable had a rotted section. He swung the hammer, drove nails, his breath turning to mist in the cold as sweat gathered on his skin. Thomas came to him in the afternoon, bringing water. A duke has never worked like this, he said. But there was no mockery in his voice. I have worked, James replied. Just for other things. Thomas took back the water vessel and turned to leave. Thomas, James said. The man paused. Is there anyone in the house who would support me? From the old staff, someone you trust. Thomas thought. There are a few. But they are afraid, my lord. Mr. Richard is not an easy man. I do not need their names yet, James said. Only whether they exist. They do, Thomas said. James nodded. That is enough. Eleanor came on the second day, near midday. She entered through the stable door, careful, quick, glancing around. In her hands was a cloth bundle, inside it bread and cheese. James was cleaning a bridle. He lifted his head. Eleanor stopped. Looked at him. I brought food, she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were not. Thank you. She stepped forward and held out the bundle. James took it. For a moment, the briefest moment, their hands touched. Accidental. Eleanor pulled hers away immediately. How are you? James asked. I am well. Eleanor. I am well, James. This time she said his name, quickly, without thinking. Then she realized, but did not take it back. How are you? Here, in this cold. I am well. No, you are not. The words escaped her, control slipped, just for a second. Then she gathered herself. Her voice lowered. A duke sleeping in a stable. This is not right. What would be right, Eleanor? James said. His voice was not harsh, only flat. That I leave? That I abandon you here? Eleanor did not answer. How will Richard continue to treat you if I am not here? James unwrapped the cloth, broke the bread. Have you thought about that? I have, Eleanor said, very softly. I have thought about everything. And I am afraid. She said it for the first time. Plainly. Without concealment. I am afraid for you. What is your plan, James? How long will you remain in this stable? How will you win? Richard has lawyers, connections. Sometimes, a single document is enough, James said. Eleanor stilled. What document? James looked at her. Considered how much to reveal. Then he reached into his pocket, took out the letter. He did not hand it to her, just held it. My father left something, he said. Thomas kept it. There is a name in it, someone in London. Someone my father trusted. Eleanor's eyes widened. Who? I do not know yet. But I will find out. He returned the letter to his pocket. First, I must find the false witness on Richard's death notice. There are army records. I can access them. Eleanor watched him for a long moment. Then asked, when? A few days. Perhaps a week. And until then? I remain in the stable, James said. You remain in the manor. And we both behave as though everything is normal. A flicker crossed Eleanor's face. Something difficult, complicated. Normal, she repeated. I am a servant, and you are in the stable. That is normal. It is temporary, James said. Silence. A horse shifted outside, the wind rattled the door. Eleanor lowered her head. Her fingers gripped the edge of her apron. I had lost you, she said, slowly, almost to herself. When the news came. I did not believe it for days. I told everyone it must be a mistake, that it could not be you, it must be someone else. Then the documents came, sealed, with your name. She paused. I cried. For a long time. Then my father died, then everything was lost, then I came here, and, she lifted her head. Her eyes were filled, but her voice was steady. And then you walked through the door. James rose. This time, Eleanor did not step back. He moved closer. Stopped, a single step between them. He reached out, did not touch her face, but took her hand. Just held it. Firmly. Steadily. I am here, he said. I am not leaving. And this time, it is real. A tear fell from Eleanor's eyes. Only one. She wiped it away immediately, quickly, but too late. James saw it. Go inside, he said quietly. It is cold. Eleanor withdrew her hand. Turned. Walked toward the door. At the threshold, she stopped. She did not turn, but her voice came back to him. Is Thomas taking proper care of you? Do you have enough blankets? For the first time in a long while, James almost smiled. I do. Eleanor left. James stood for a moment, looking at the door. Then he lifted the bread, took a bite. It was cold, but it was good. On the third day, Richard came to the stable. It was not early morning, but afternoon. He was dressed neatly, his hands behind his back, walking with ease. James was carrying a wooden beam. He did not stop. Richard watched him. "How are you?" he asked. "I am well." "Comfortable here?" "Yes." Richard waited a moment. James set the beam in place, turned, and looked at him. "What do you want, Richard?" Richard shrugged. "I came to check on you. After all, you are my guest." "My guest," James repeated, letting the word settle. Richard smiled. "You made your choice." "I did." "No regrets?" "No." Richard stepped forward slightly, walking past the horses, glancing around. It was a possessive gaze. He looked at everything that way, as though it belonged to him. James watched him. "I see Eleanor sometimes," Richard said. It was deliberate. "She works well. A very diligent woman." James said nothing. "She is beautiful as well," Richard added. "I had not noticed before, but I do now." "You were engaged, were you not?" "Before the war." "A long time ago." He paused. "Much has changed." James picked up the shovel and resumed working. "You are trying to provoke me," he said. His voice was flat. "I am only speaking." "Are you finished speaking?" Richard laughed. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "James," he said, turning back. His smile was gone now. The man beneath it remained, cold, calculating. "This game cannot last forever. In the end, you will either leave or accept things as they are. There is no other path." James set the shovel aside. Turned to him. "There is a third path," he said. "What is that?" "To win." Silence. Richard looked at him. James looked back. Something tightened in the air between them, thin, fragile, but real. Then Richard turned and left. James picked up the shovel and continued working. But his eyes remained on the door, until it closed, until Richard's footsteps faded. Then he thought of the letter in his pocket. Tomorrow, he would go to London. That night, James did not sleep until late. He sat in the back corner of the stable, a candle before him, his father's letter open in his hands. He had read it many times, memorized the words, turned every sentence over in his mind. Yet with each reading, he saw something new. Or wanted to. Asterisk: if one day things go wrong, go to this man. His name is Edward Hale. A lawyer in London. Show him this letter, tell him my name, he will know the rest. There are things I could not tell you, my son. But Hale knows. He is trustworthy, perhaps the only one, asterisk. That was all. James folded the letter and slipped it back into his pocket. Extinguished the candle. Waited in the dark. He did not know the hour. It was late, the house long silent, when the stable door opened slowly. James lifted his head. Eleanor entered. A heavy shawl around her shoulders, a small lantern in her hand. She closed the door behind her, paused, her eyes searching the darkness until they found him. Then she moved closer, quietly, carefully. She came to him. Did not sit, remained standing. "You were not sleeping," she said. It was not a question. "No. Neither was I." They stood in silence for a while. Eleanor set the lantern down, its light cast a low circle between them. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls, one of the horses shifted restlessly. Eleanor slowly sat, not beside him, but across from him, the circle of light between them. "You are going to London tomorrow," she said. "Early in the morning. What will you find there?" I do not yet know, James said. But I have a starting point. Eleanor drew her knees closer, wrapping the shawl around herself. Her eyes rested on the lantern's flame, small, flickering, but unextinguished. James, she said. Then stopped. Speak. I want to apologize. James was surprised. He did not show it, but something inside him paused. For what? Eleanor lifted her head. Her eyes were steady, unflinching. When the news came. I cried, I broke, I spent months putting myself back together. But then I did something. She paused. I let go. Eleanor. No, listen. Her voice had not hardened, only steadied. At some point I told myself, he's gone, it's over, I have to go on. And I did. I came here, I put on this apron, I woke up every morning. I told myself, you have to survive. That was true. But, she stopped, swallowing. But somewhere, deep inside, I let you go. I stopped saying your name. I stopped thinking of your face. Because every time I did, I could not bear it. James said nothing. Now I am here, Eleanor continued. And you are here. And I still do not know how to act. Everything happened too fast, it is too complicated, and her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. I am sorry. I do not know if it is necessary. But I needed to say it. James leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You did not hear about the 3 years I spent in the camp, he said. Eleanor looked at him. For the first 6 months, I did not know if I would survive, James said. His voice was even, he was not complaining, only stating. Then a routine formed. The same thing every day. Eat, wait, sleep, wake. He paused. Within that routine, there was something in me, small, stubborn. I held on to the thought that I would return to Renmore. That I would return to you. Eleanor's eyes filled. Then an opportunity came to escape. It was dangerous. Most men did not try, James continued. I did. Because I had somewhere to go. Silence. The wind passed, the lantern flickered, the light trembled. You do not need to apologize, James said. You survived. You had to let go because you could not carry it. I understand that. This time, more than one tear fell from Eleanor's eyes. She did not wipe them away. But you carried it, she said. I am a man, James replied. Then, almost imperceptibly, he gave a faint smile. Carrying things without asking questions is easier. Eleanor looked at him. Then she laughed as well, a brief, unexpected, real laugh. It passed quickly, but it was there. And in that moment, James saw the woman he had left 3 years ago, exactly her, no one else. Then it was gone. Eleanor grew serious again. How long will you stay in London? She asked. 2 days. Perhaps 3. And during that time, Richard. Thomas is here, James said. And you are here. Eleanor frowned. I am a servant. I know what you are, James said, his voice lower now. And I know who you are. Those are not the same thing. Eleanor looked at him for a long time. Then lowered her gaze. Be careful, she said. In London, on the road, everywhere. Richard may have men watching. I know how to be careful. I do not think you do, Eleanor said. Her voice rose slightly, soft, but clear. Because a careful man would not sleep in a stable. He would act the duke, hire lawyers, use his connections. You chose to put yourself at a disadvantage. She paused. Why? James looked at her. Because Richard underestimates me, he said. He thinks I am weak. He does not see me as a threat. That is my greatest advantage. Eleanor considered this for a moment. Then inclined her head, not in agreement, but in acceptance. Very well, she said. James stood. Eleanor stood as well. She picked up the lantern and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. James. He did not turn. He was still looking toward the door. When you return to Renmore, she stopped. Did not finish. James waited. Nothing, Eleanor said. She opened the door. Eleanor. She stopped. Finish the sentence. A long silence. The wind pushed against the door, cold air spilling inside. Eleanor's shawl shifted. When you return to Renmore, she said, very softly, when everything is set right. I do not know if I will still want to be here. Not as a servant. But I do not know what else I can be now. Too much has changed. I have changed. James took a step forward. Just one. You have not changed, he said. You have been broken. That is not the same. Broken things can be repaired. Eleanor turned. Her eyes were on his. Within them that same complex, layered thing remained, unresolved. But beneath it now, there was something else. Small, fragile, but present. It resembled hope. James stepped closer. Stopped, a breath of distance between them. Eleanor did not move away. He lifted his hand. He did not touch her face, only adjusted a strand of her hair, closed the edge of her shawl at her collar. Small, ordinary gestures, as though he had always done them. Eleanor held her breath. Go inside, James said. It is cold. She did not move for a second. Then she turned and left. James stood in the doorway, looking out into the dark garden. The manor lights were dim. The wind moved through the grounds. Tomorrow, London. He slipped his hand into his pocket. Felt the letter. Edward Hale. He did not know who the man was. But his father had trusted him. And for now, that was all he had. It would be enough. He returned to the stable. Lay down. That night, he slept. London was cold. James reached the city in 2 days, on horseback, avoiding the main roads, taking the coastal routes instead. He needed to be cautious. Richard had connections in the city, he knew that. A familiar face seen in the wrong place would send word. When he entered the city, he felt unrecognizable. 3 years ago, James Ashford would have come here in a carriage, in clean clothes, as a name people knew. Now he arrived in a worn coat, as someone no one looked at. That was good. Edward Hale's office was near the Thames, on a narrow street, in the second floor of an old building. James climbed the stairs, found the door. The sign was small, only a name, only a profession. No display. He knocked. Come in, a voice answered from within. The man was in his 60s. Short, wearing spectacles, papers scattered across his desk. When he saw James, he did not rise immediately, he observed first. Assessed. Then he stood. Who are you? He asked. James walked to the desk. Took out the letter. Held it out. The man took it. Opened it. Read it, slowly, absorbing each word. Then he looked at James again, this time differently. Recognizing. Understanding. Sit, he said. As Hale began to speak, James understood why his father had written that letter. The man knew everything. Your father came to me years ago, Hale said. His hands were folded on the desk, his voice measured, precise, without unnecessary emotion. He had suspicions about Richard Ashford. Old documents, old accounts. He had noticed irregularities, small discrepancies. Money that had gone where it should not. Theft? James asked. More complex, Hale replied. Richard had certain lands registered under his own name. With forged documents. When your father realized, he confronted him, but could not prove it. Richard had acted ahead of the records. He paused. That is why your father came to me. To gather evidence. But my father died. Yes. Hale adjusted his glasses. There was no time. But the documents remained. I kept them, at your father's request. In case someone came, one day. James leaned forward. Where are they? Hale stood. Went to a cabinet, searched briefly. Returned with a large envelope, placed it on the desk. Here, he said. But on their own, they are not enough. In court, you will need a witness. And you must prove the forged signature on the death notice. I have found the false witness, James said. Or I am close. Hale raised an eyebrow. How? James explained, briefly, without unnecessary detail. The name on the death notice. The incorrectly written officer. Someone not from his unit. Hale listened. Then shuffled through his papers, found something. I can access Army records, he said. I have a former client, high-ranking. We can examine the records concerning that witness. He paused. But Mr. James. He looked over his glasses. If this goes to court, Richard will deny everything. He will hire defense lawyers, delay, prolong the process. You must understand that. I do, James said. And during that time, you are still, Hale paused. Where are you staying at present? In a stable. Hale looked at him for a moment. Then removed his glasses, set them on the desk. In a stable, he repeated. Yes. For a moment, Hale said nothing. Then he gave a slight nod, not in approval, but in acceptance. Very well, he said. Then we must move quickly. There is a way to corner Richard without waiting for the court. Explain. They spoke for 2 hours. Hale spread documents across the desk. James leaned over them, tracing lines with his finger. The papers had been there for years, yellowed, some warped by damp, but legible. Some bore his father's handwriting. Each time James saw it, he paused, for a second only. Then continued. Hale explained. The lands Richard had falsely registered were clearly recorded. But more importantly, there was something else, the notary who had authorized those registrations. That notary was still in London. Still alive. He signed under pressure, Hale said. He told me years ago, but refused to testify. He was afraid. Will he testify now? If he believes Richard can no longer reach him, Hale said. But for that, Richard must first be weakened. James stood. Walked the length of the room, short, narrow, finished in 3 steps. The false witness on the death notice, he said. Find him. That changes everything. Why? Because the land documents prove an old crime, James said. But the false death notice is different. It is deliberate, planned, a direct act against me. The court will treat that far more severely. Hale considered this. Then nodded. I can access the army records tomorrow, he said. By evening, I will have something. I will remain here, James said. Hale returned early the next morning. James was already waiting in his room, a small, inexpensive, unremarkable place. When Hale entered, his face was different. Serious, but with something beneath it. Not quite excitement, but the look of a man who had found something important. You found it, James said. I did, Hale replied. He sat, opened his bag, and pulled out a document. The witness on the death notice is listed as Thomas Reeve. But there is no officer by that name in the army records. He paused. However, there is a similar name. Timothy Reeve. Dismissed from service, bribery charges. 3 years ago. James's eyes narrowed. 3 years ago. The same time you were taken prisoner, Hale said. And Timothy Reeve's last known address, he glanced at the paper. A small town, 2 hours from Renmore. Silence. James stood. Richard found him, he said. A dismissed officer, in need of money, forgotten by everyone. He bought him. So it appears, Hale said. If we find this man and make him speak. Everything collapses, James said. Hale nodded. Everything collapses. James moved to the window. Looked out at London's grey morning, fog, cold, crowded streets. Barges drifted along the Thames in the distance. He thought. There was something in him, something he had felt in war. A critical moment. One wrong move, and everything would be lost. The right move, and the door would open. I will find him, James said. It could be dangerous, Hale warned. If Richard learns. He won't, James said, turning. You speak to the notary. Soften him, prepare him. I will find Timothy Reeve. Hale hesitated. Mr. James, this is a legal matter. There are procedures. I know, James said. But first, we find the people. The rules come after. Hale studied him for a moment. Then gave a slight shrug, the gesture of a man who had stopped arguing. 2 days, he said. Meet me again in 2 days. That evening, on his way back to Renmore, James stopped in the town. It was small, only a few shops, an inn, narrow streets. James entered the inn, spoke with the barman. Left money. Asked questions. Timothy Reeve. The barman recognized the name, he owed money there. Easy to trace. James found him that same night. A small room, half drunk, an empty glass before him. James sat across from him. The man looked up, his eyes clouded, but something shifted when he saw James. He did not recognize him, but he sensed danger. Who are you? He asked. James Ashford, James said. The man froze. He set down his glass. Tried to stand. James reached across the table, took his wrist. Not forcefully, but firmly. Do not be afraid, James said. His voice was even. I am not here to harm you. Then why are you here? Because your name appears on a forged document, James said. A death notice. 3 years ago. Do you remember? The man swallowed. Said nothing. You remember, James said. And you know what that document was used for. He released his wrist, leaned forward. Richard Ashford found you. Paid you. You signed. That is a crime. The man's eyes shifted. Avoiding. I didn't know. You did. Silence. The man stared at the table. His hands trembled. If Richard finds out, he said, trailing off. Richard will not be able to protect you much longer, James said. But right now, he is strong. Right now, he could ruin me. And you stand as a piece on his board. He paused. Or, you speak to me. You testify. And when this ends, Richard will have no reach left, because he will be finished. The man looked at him for a long time. Fear filled his eyes, raw, exposed, the fear of a man cornered. And if you lose? He asked. Then we both lose, James said. But if we win, you walk free. Silence stretched. From outside came the sounds of the street, a laugh, a door closing. The inn glowed dimly around them. The man lowered his head. What do I have to do? He said. By the time James returned to Renmore, night had fallen. He entered the stable. Thomas was there, finishing the last of the work. When he saw James, he stopped, studied him. There was something in James's face, fatigue, yes, but beneath it something else. The weight a man carries when he has finally found what he has been searching for. How was the journey, my lord? Thomas asked. Good, James said. He removed his coat. Thomas. In a few days, things will change. Be ready. Thomas nodded. I am always ready, my lord. James went to his corner, sat down. He took out the envelope, the documents Hale had given him. He held it in the dark, did not open it. He already knew what was inside. It was enough. The door opened. It was Eleanor. James was not surprised, he had sensed it, recognized her by her steps. She entered, closed the door behind her. This time, she carried no lantern, only her shawl. She stood in the darkness. You returned, she said. I did. Did you find what you were looking for? James paused for a moment. I did. Eleanor stepped closer. Sat beside him, not across this time, but next to him, leaving only a narrow space between them. James noticed, but said nothing. Tell me, she said. James told her. About Hale, the documents, Timothy Reeve. Eleanor listened, never interrupting, never questioning. She simply absorbed every word. Her eyes remained forward, her hands in her lap, but she took it all in. When he finished, there was silence. Then Eleanor spoke. Richard called me today, she said. James turned. Why? Eleanor's jaw tightened. He said you would be leaving soon. That the stable does not suit you, that sooner or later you will accept things and walk away. And when that happens, she stopped. And then? And then my situation may change, Eleanor said. Her voice was steady, but something lay beneath it, disgust, anger, restrained. He offered me a more suitable position. Better than being a servant. James's hands clenched into fists. What did you say? He asked. His voice was controlled. Very controlled. I said no, Eleanor replied. I always say no. She turned to him, her gaze sharp and clear. But this time, he said it differently. He said, your options are narrowing. I think he has a plan, James. I think he is going to act. What could he do? I do not know, Eleanor said. But I have watched him for 8 months. When he is cornered, he does not wait, he moves. And you are cornering him now. She paused. Be careful. James watched her for a moment. Then asked, are you afraid? Eleanor thought. truly thought. No quick answer came. Yes, she said at last. But it is different now. Before, I was afraid of what would happen to me. She paused. Now I am afraid of what will happen to you. James said nothing. The small distance remained between them. Neither turned, both stared ahead into the quiet warmth of the stable. James lifted his hand. He found hers. Held it. This time it was not accidental, this time it was deliberate. Slow. Asking. Without force. Eleanor did not pull away. Her fingers intertwined with his, slowly, hesitantly, but they did. They sat like that for a long time. Saying nothing. Outside, the wind moved. Inside, there were two people, broken, but not destroyed, tired, but not finished, lost, but not yet undone. Then Eleanor spoke, very softly, almost a whisper. Will you win? James tightened his grip slightly. Yes, he said. Eleanor rested her head against his shoulder. Slowly, carefully, as though asking permission. James did not move. He simply sat. And for the first time in a long while, for the first time, he felt something in that stable that he had not felt in war, nor in the prison camp, nor in London. He felt that he had come home. But late that night, when the house had gone silent, a light burned in Richard's study. He sat at his desk. A sheet of paper before him, fresh ink. He read it once, then again. Then sealed it in an envelope. A bell stood on the desk. He rang it. A servant entered. Deliver this first thing in the morning, Richard said. The address is on the envelope. The servant took it and left. Richard leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled before him. His eyes fixed on the ceiling. James had gone to London. Stayed 2 days. Whom had he seen? Hale. Richard's face tightened. Yes, he must have seen Hale. His father's foolish lawyer. But what use were those documents? Old, incomplete, difficult to prove. Not enough. And yet. Richard stood. Walked to the window. The garden lay in darkness. A faint light burned in the stable. James was still there. Stubborn. Richard clenched his jaw. Then steadied himself. Smiled, to himself, at the dark reflection in the glass. Tomorrow, everything would change. Once that letter reached its destination, Eleanor would have no choice left. And when Eleanor was gone, James would have nothing left to hold on to. He turned from the window. And went to bed. Morning came early. Eleanor was in the kitchen, the fire burning, bread in the oven, her hands moving with practiced rhythm. But her mind was elsewhere. The night before, she had sat in the stable, rested her head against James's shoulder, held his hand. When she woke, that warmth remained, not physical, but somewhere deeper. It was dangerous. Because hope was dangerous. She had learned that over 8 months. Hope only made the breaking worse. And yet. The door opened. Richard entered. Eleanor turned. Composed her face, flat, neutral, the servant's expression. But something inside her tightened. Richard rarely came to the kitchen. When he did, it was never for anything good. He held an envelope. Sit, he said. Sir, I have work. Sit, Eleanor. She sat. Her hands clasped before her. Richard sat across from her. He placed the envelope on the table between them, did not push it yet. Let it rest there. James returned yesterday, he said. I know, sir. He went to London. Richard tapped the table lightly, a habit, thoughtful. I do not know whom he saw, what he discussed. But I can make a guess. He paused. James is a diligent man. Always has been. Once he decides something, he does not let it go. Eleanor waited. You are the same, Richard said. His tone unchanged, calm, almost gentle. You have been here for 8 months. Despite everything, you remain. That requires will. What do you want, sir? Richard slid the envelope forward. It stopped in front of her. Open it, he said. Eleanor looked at it. Her name was written on the front, not in her own hand, but another's. She took it. Opened it. Pulled out the paper inside. She read. Once. Then again. Her face did not change. But her hands tightened, the paper creased slightly between her fingers. It was a legal document. It concerned her father's debts, old, written years ago. And beneath it was a name, Richard Ashford. Listed as the creditor. Her father's debt had been transferred to Richard. And at the bottom of the document, there was a small handwritten note. Asterisk, in exchange for this debt, Eleanor Voss's labor at Renmore Manor shall not be considered sufficient collateral. Further arrangement is required for payment. Asterisk. Eleanor placed the paper on the table. What does this mean? She said. It was not a question. Richard leaned back. Your father owed money, Eleanor. To me. For years. You did not know because I chose not to tell you. I did not wish to seem cruel. He paused. But now I must. Because with James's return, things have become complicated, and I cannot carry this uncertainty. What do you want? Richard leaned forward. You have options. First, you acknowledge the debt, we go to court, and you become part of the proceedings. It will be long, exhausting, and I cannot say what will remain of you at the end. He paused. Second. You accept my offer, Richard said, lowering his voice. You remain here. But not as a servant. In a more permanent arrangement. Eleanor looked at him. Richard smiled. James will not win, Eleanor. What does he have? An old lawyer, incomplete documents. I have been here for 3 years. Everything is in my hands, documents, connections, money. He sleeps in the stable, you work in the kitchen. Where do you think this is going? Eleanor stood. Richard stood as well. Think. Think carefully. Eleanor took the paper. Turned. Left the kitchen. She walked down the corridor, fast, straight, without looking to either side. She stepped outside. The cold struck her face, she paused, drew a breath. Then she ran to the stable. James had already begun his morning work. He was speaking quietly with Thomas, making plans. Hale would arrive within 2 days. Timothy Reeve had agreed to testify. The notary had begun to soften, at the slightest sign of Richard's weakening, he would speak. Everything was coming together. Slowly. Carefully. But it was coming. The stable door opened. James turned. It was Eleanor, and the moment he saw her face, something in him went on alert. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes were not. Her hands were tight, her steps sharp. Thomas, James said. Would you leave us? Thomas left. Eleanor approached, held out the paper. James took it. Read it, once, quickly, taking in every word. Then he lowered it. Looked at her. When did you receive this? Just now. Richard came to the kitchen. James glanced at the paper again. Her father's debt. Transferred to Richard. The document looked real, or convincingly so. Professionally prepared. "You have never seen this before?" he asked. "No," Eleanor said. "My father spoke of debts, but I never knew to whom." She paused. "If I had known this before, I would never have come here." "I know. James." Her voice rose slightly. "If this document is real." "It is not," James said. Eleanor stilled. "How do you know?" James folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. "Because Hale has all of your father's debt records. He was his lawyer, everything is with him. This name is not on that list." He paused. "Richard fabricated it." Eleanor's shoulders dropped, slightly, but noticeably. As though she had released something she had been holding. "Are you certain?" she asked. "Yes," James said. Then added, "This is good news." Eleanor frowned. "How is this good news?" "Because Richard is afraid," James said. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, the tone of a man recognizing a critical moment. "He learned I went to London. He realized I found Hale. So he created this document, to frighten you, to drive you away from me." He paused. A cornered man makes a move. This was his. Eleanor considered it. Her eyes remained on James, measuring, weighing, deciding. "And your move?" she asked. James paused for a moment. "Hale will be here in 2 days," he said. "Timothy Reeve will testify. And we expect something from the notary." He paused. "But before we wait, I need to speak to Richard." "For what?" "To give him a chance," James said. "If he withdraws on his own, there will be no court, no scandal. He leaves quietly." Eleanor frowned. "Why would you give him that chance?" "I am not giving it," James said evenly. "But I will offer it. He will refuse. And when he does, everyone will hear it." Eleanor understood. "You want witnesses," she said. "Thomas is one. Perhaps a few others." He paused. "And you?" That afternoon, James entered the manor. For the first time in 3 days, he stepped inside. 2 footmen stood in the corridor. They froze when they saw him. James walked straight ahead, without looking to either side. He knocked on the study door. "Come in." Richard was at his desk. When he saw James, he rose instinctively, then restrained himself, slowed, and sat again. It was a posture of ownership. "James," he said. "How are you?" "I am well." James closed the door, stepped forward. He did not sit. "I want to speak with you." "Go on." "I have an offer," James said. He did not place anything on the table. Did not produce a document. He simply stood there. "Leave." Quietly. "By agreement. The estate, including the disputed lands, returns to me. You go wherever you wish, London, Scotland. I will not pursue you." Richard watched him for a moment. Then he laughed. It was genuine, but laced with mockery. "Is that your offer?" he said. "You walk in from the stable and offer me pardon?" "Not pardon," James said. "A way out." "I do not need a way out, James." Richard stood, walked around the desk, approached him. "Look at me. What did you bring back from London?" "An old lawyer and unfinished documents. I have been here 3 years. Everything is built around me. A court case would take years. And in that time, you. Timothy Reeve, James said. Richard froze. Only for a second. But he froze. James saw it. And understood, everything was in that pause. Fear. Calculation. A mind moving quickly. Who? Richard said. His voice was flat. Too flat. A dismissed officer, James said. The one who signed my death notice. Lives 2 hours from Renmore. He paused. He has agreed to speak. Silence. Heavy. Prolonged. Ready to fracture. Richard's face did not change, but it was clear he was working to keep it that way. His muscles had tightened. His eyes scanned James, fast, searching for an exit. A false witness, Richard said at last. It will not hold. Perhaps, James said. But there are your father's debt records as well. Hale has them. And the forged land transfers. And a notary who signed under pressure, who is prepared to speak. He paused. Each alone may not be enough. Together. You cannot prove it. The court will decide, James said. I will simply present the evidence. Richard stepped closer. His voice lowered, not quite a threat, but near it. James. Do not do this. It will become a scandal. The Ashford name will be dragged into court, into the papers. Everyone will talk. It will damage you as well. I know, James said. Then. I will do it anyway, James said. Because this was my father's house. And you declared me dead with a forged document. He paused. One final time. The offer still stands. Leave, quietly, cleanly. Tonight. Hale arrives in the morning. Richard stared at him. James held his gaze. That moment, everything turned on it. Everything converged there. And in Richard's eyes, James saw something shift. The calculation was ending. The numbers no longer aligned. And Richard knew it. But he could not surrender his pride. No, he said. James nodded once. Turned, walked to the door. James. Richard's voice came sharp behind him. By tomorrow morning, you will regret this. James opened the door. Perhaps, he said. And left. That night, the house fell into a strange silence. James returned to the stable. Spoke with Thomas, about the morning, about Hale's arrival, about preparations. Thomas listened, nodding. Old, tired, but steady. Eleanor came after dinner. She saw James. Stopped. Looked at him. How did it go? She asked. As expected, James said. He refused. Eleanor nodded. She had nearly expected that. She stepped inside, sat beside him, without hesitation this time, without delay. James noticed, but said nothing. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, James replied. Silence. Then Eleanor spoke, quietly, thoughtfully. After you win, she said. When everything is set right. When this house is yours again. She paused. What will I be? James turned to her. This time, she did not look away. She held his gaze, direct, open, unguarded. Everything she had kept closed for 8 months was in that look. Fear. Hope. And a question long left unspoken. James did not answer immediately. He stood. Eleanor stood as well. The space between them narrowed. James reached into his pocket. Eleanor waited. He took something out, small, metal, faintly golden. Eleanor's eyes widened. A ring. Old. Simple. Familiar. Her ring. The engagement ring he had given her before the war, the one she had worn as he placed it on her finger, standing in the garden, sunlight around them, as he said, "I will return." This, Eleanor's voice faltered. "I carried it with me," James said. Simply. Without display. For 3 years. Every day. Eleanor's eyes filled. This time, she did not wipe them. "James. There were 2 men with me when I left the camp," James said. "Both died. Before they did, they gave me what they had, savings, letters, things for their families. I carried them back. Delivered them." He paused. "And I carried this. Because I needed a reason to carry something." A tear fell from Eleanor's eyes. Then another. James extended his hand. The ring rested in his palm. "I want to ask properly," he said. "Not in the garden. Not in the sunlight. Not with people watching." He glanced around the stable, hay, wood, the quiet presence of horses. Then back at her. A faint smile touched his lips. "Here. Like this." Eleanor laughed through her tears, both at once, tangled, real. "Yes," she said. She did not need to, but she said it. "Yes, James." James placed the ring on her finger. Eleanor looked at it, at her hand, the ring, then back at him. For the first time, truly the first time, the weight in James's face was gone. The exhaustion remained, the scars remained, but that compressed, buried thing was gone. Eleanor took his hand. He held hers. They stood like that for a long time. Hale arrived the next morning. With him came Timothy Reeve, pale, tense, but standing. Hale had also brought 2 official officers from London, authorized to verify military records and documents. Word was sent to Richard, they would gather in the study. When James entered the great hall, Thomas was already there. And 2 of the kitchen women. And the old gardener from the grounds. The old staff, present by their own will, quietly. Eleanor was there as well. She stood by the door, still in her apron. But her posture was different. Her shoulders were straight. Her head lifted. As James passed, he looked at her. Eleanor gave a small nod, firm, deliberate. James continued. The study was full. Richard sat at the desk. His lawyer was beside him, expensive, brought from London. Richard's face was composed, but tension lay beneath it. His eyes moved quickly across the room, calculating, searching. When he saw Timothy Reeve, he faltered. Only for a moment. But it was enough. Hale began. He placed the documents on the table, one by one, in order. Forged land registrations. Notarial approvals obtained under pressure. Army records. And Timothy Reeve's written statement, how he had been found, what had been promised to him, why he had signed. Richard's lawyer objected, "These documents are invalid, this witness is unreliable, the procedure is improper." "The court will decide," Hale said calmly. "We are only placing them on the table." Richard rose. "James, this." "Sit, Richard," James said. His voice was level. Not raised, not hardened. Simply steady, and impossible to break. Richard sat. Hale continued. He explained each document, each signature, each date. At one point, Timothy Reeve spoke, briefly, unsteadily, but he spoke. He described how he had been approached. What had been said to him? And why he had agreed? He had been without money, afraid, and had seen no other way. The room was silent. Richard's lawyer continued with technical objections, procedural challenges. Hale answered each one. Calm, prepared, as though he had anticipated every question. Then it was finished. Hale gathered the documents. The officials signed, verification, confirmation. The court process would follow, but this meeting had already made one thing clear: the documents were real. The witness was real. And Richard Ashford knew it. Richard remained seated for a long time. His lawyer whispered, but Richard did not listen. Then he stood. He looked at James. The calculation was gone now, the numbers had run out. Something else lay beneath. James did not try to name it. Richard said nothing. He left the room. By mid-morning, the news came. Richard's room was empty. His bag was gone. His horse had been taken from the stable. Thomas had noticed, had brought word. A note had been left on the table, a single line. Asterisk, my lawyer will be in contact. Asterisk. That was all. James read it, folded it, set it aside. Hale stood beside him. He fled, Hale said. He chose escape over judgment. I expected it, James replied. We should pursue him. The legal process. Hale, James said, turning. Not today. Hale looked at him. Understood. Nodded. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, James answered. The house began to breathe again. Staff moved through the corridors, returning to old habits, old rhythms. Thomas worked in the stable, whistling. Voices came from the kitchen. James entered the great hall. Stopped. He looked at the pale rectangle on the wall, the mark where his father's portrait had once hung. Then he turned. Eleanor stood in the doorway. Her apron was gone, for the first time in that house. She held it in her hands, not gripping it, simply holding it. James walked toward her. Stopped, a single step between them. Eleanor looked at him. In that gaze was everything: 8 months, 3 years, what had been broken, what had been carried, what had never been said. Is it over? She asked. Not entirely, James said. There will be court, lawyers, it will take time. He paused. But the hardest part is done. Eleanor nodded. Silence. Then she asked, quietly, plainly. Where is my father's portrait? James looked at her. Then he laughed, short, real, drawn from beneath exhaustion. We will have to find it, he said. Eleanor laughed as well. And in that laughter, tired, fractured, but real, Renmore Manor breathed again. James extended his hand. Eleanor took it. Their fingers intertwined, the ring still cold, the metal carrying the chill, but warming. Slowly, steadily. Sunlight entered through the window. It was November sunlight, pale, fleeting. But it was there. And it was enough. 1 year later. The snow had melted in the gardens of Renmore Manor. It was the first mild day of March, the sun not yet strong, the grass still wet with morning dew. But something was in the air. Something that spoke of winter ending, of movement beneath the soil. Eleanor stood in the garden. A light shawl around her shoulders, pruning shears in hand. She looked toward the place where James's mother's rose garden had once been, the place Richard had cleared, replaced with symmetrical shrubs. The shrubs had survived the winter, standing firm. But Eleanor was not looking at them. Her gaze was fixed on the soil. The previous autumn, once everything had been set right, the first thing she had done was visit a nursery. She had asked for the old varieties, the roses James's mother had grown. Pale pink, soft yellow, deep velvet red. The nursery had found them. Eleanor had planted them herself. Now she studied the ground carefully. A small green shoot. Fragile. Uncertain. But there. Eleanor knelt, gently adjusting the soil around it. She smiled, quietly, to herself. Did it come through? It was James's voice, behind her. She had heard his steps, but had not turned. It is trying, Eleanor said. Not certain yet. James stepped beside her, bent down, saw the small green tip. He watched it for a moment. It will grow, he said. I hope so. They stood together, looking out over the garden, the wet grass, the old trees, the distant stable. Everything was the same. Everything was different. Hale is coming today, James said. The final papers will be signed. I know. The court ruled in Richard's absence. It is finished now. Eleanor nodded. Richard had fled to Ireland 6 months earlier, quietly, without notice. Hale had followed his trail for a time. Then James had stopped him. Let him go, he had said. What would we do with him here? Hale had understood. Some accounts closed in court. Others elsewhere. Thomas was very pleased this morning, Eleanor said, a smile in her voice. He asked for money to repair the stable roof, as though it were a great matter. Took 10 sentences to explain what could have been said in 3. James laughed. Did you give it to him? Of course. James looked at her. Eleanor was still watching the small green shoot. How are you? He asked. She turned to him. James always asked it differently. It was never just how are you. There was always something beneath it. How are you, truly, today, in this moment? Eleanor thought. It had become a habit, not to answer quickly, not to say I am well without meaning it. I am well, she said. Then added, truly. James waited. Sometimes, when I wake, Eleanor said slowly, for a moment I still feel as though I am a servant here. As though I must rise, go to the kitchen, Richard will call for something. She smiled faintly. Then I look around, and I see where I am. And I feel good, she said. Very good. James reached for her hand. She gave it. Their fingers intertwined, familiar now, settled. They stood in the garden, in the morning light, on the damp grass. In the distance, a carriage entered through the gates, Hale's carriage, bringing the final documents. James shifted slightly. Eleanor did as well. But before they left, Eleanor turned once more, looking at the green shoot. It was still there. Small. Fragile. But there. That afternoon, the final documents were signed. As Hale gathered the papers, he smiled, a rare, restrained smile. Your father would have been pleased, he said. James said nothing. But he nodded. Hale departed. The house grew quiet. James remained in the study for a time, at his father's desk, in his father's chair. He looked at the shelves. The books had been restored to their proper order. The hunting collection had returned, found, reclaimed. And on the wall, his father's portrait hung once more. We found it, James thought. It had been discovered at the framers, left there under the pretense of restoration. The frame was intact. Nothing had been lost. James looked at the portrait. His father's expression was stern, as always in portraits of that era. But James knew those eyes. He knew what lay behind them. "It is done," he said quietly, alone in the room. Then he rose. Dinner was taken at the smaller table that evening, not the great one, but the room near the kitchen. Thomas sat with them this time, at Eleanor's insistence. At first, he hesitated. "I am no gentleman, my lord." "Sit, Thomas," James said. Thomas sat. The meal was simple, prepared by Eleanor, alongside the kitchen staff. She had not said it, but James understood, she still spent time there by choice. It was something tangible, something she could hold. A habit that had kept her alive for 8 months. It did not need to be abandoned. As they ate, Thomas told old stories, of James as a boy, of his father. Small things. Forgotten things. Once, James had fallen from his horse and had not cried, but had clenched his teeth so tightly his cheek had swollen. His father had not noticed. Thomas had. Eleanor laughed. Thomas laughed. James laughed. For the first time in a long time, 3 people laughed at that table. Late that night, when the house had gone quiet, Eleanor stepped into the garden. It was cold, the nights were still cold, March was deceptive. She wrapped her shawl tightly and walked across the damp grass to the rose beds. Not to see. Only to be there. James followed. Whether he had known or simply chosen, she did not ask. He stood beside her. They remained there, in the dark, beneath the stars, their breath visible in the cold air. "Sometimes," Eleanor said, then paused. James waited. "Sometimes I think of those days," she continued. "In the kitchen. The cold mornings. My hands burned from the fire, my back ached, and," she paused. "And I wonder, if the girl I was then had known. If she had known she would stand here 1 year later. What would it have changed?" Eleanor considered. "It might have made it easier," she said. "Or perhaps not. Perhaps it was necessary not to know. To go step by step, without seeing ahead." James nodded. He understood that. It had been the same in the camp. If he had seen a year ahead, perhaps he would not have endured. Instead, he had held on to the next day. "May I tell you something?" Eleanor said. "Yes." "That night," she said. "The night you returned. In the kitchen. You entered, I turned, our eyes met." She paused. "In that moment, I felt something. I could not say it then, I should not have, but I felt it." "What did you feel?" Eleanor searched for the word. "Relief," she said at last. "I did not know how. I did not know when. I did not know if you would survive. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. Something small. But it changed." James turned to her. She turned to him. Their eyes found each other in the darkness, the same eyes that had met in that kitchen, carrying everything, saying everything. James raised his hand. This time, he touched her face, not just a strand of hair, but her cheek. His palm was cold, her skin was warm. Eleanor placed her hand over his. Held it. They stood like that for a long time. The wind had stilled. Everything had stilled, hands, breath, time. Then a sound came from the distance, the restless movement of a horse in the stable. Thomas's quiet voice followed, calming it. The night continued. The world continued. Eleanor leaned into James. He held her. And in the garden of Renmore Manor, on a cold March night, 2 people, broken, yet repaired, stood together. Beneath the soil, the roses were growing. Slowly. Silently. Surely. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.